Hello, everybody. Anthony Crane here with Pocket Coach. So let's get into this. I got my screen open. Let's start the 5-minute timer and see how far we get. All right. So today's experiment is the product release plan. So for the product release plan, there are a lot of patterns for how you can release products. It's important that the whole team understands what pattern they're in and what patterns are available. So maybe they build towards something more interesting. The hypothesis here is that discussing these different patterns will help the team understand current state and start to help them dream of a future state. 20 minutes, this one's done. So no need to pivot or persevere during the experiment, just get her done. Might even take less. Typical outcome, you should decrease time to releasing value to the customer by understanding these types and seeing where you can go. So for skill growth, this one's super simple. All we have to do is discuss the release plan pattern. So we'll probably get it done in 4 minutes here. Okay. My shirt today, by the way, for those who are apparently interested, is the fogel. So thank you very much. All right, let's get into this. So first off, I do have a little Word document guide here. So with release planning, first understand that there are multiple patterns, and I have them kind of described here in words, but on the right, I really like this diagram. So first off, releases and sprints. If you're doing agile and you're doing sprints, whether they're 1 week, 2 week, 3 week, 4 week sprints, whatever you got, 2 week being common, what is the relationship between releases and sprints? That's the first thing everyone needs to understand when joining a team or becoming part of a team or forming a team. So the most common pattern I've seen is that there are many sprints to one release. This is the opposite of, say, like an Amazon that releases 1,000 times a day, right? This is way opposite. This is lots of sprints to one release. Those are the kind of customers that tend to hire me on. I'll call that pattern A. For pattern B, it's 1-to-1. In other words, every sprint they release to production. That's pretty amazing, right? Every sprint to production, at least for my clients. That would not be amazing for someone who's used to 1,000 sprints a day. Speaking of which, here you have many releases to one sprint. There's a legend down here. The star means many. So many releases per sprint. That's C here is the Amazon kind of way. So we got A, we got B. Notice that we're getting into more and more releases as we go. D is release on demand. So what that means is whenever someone says release, you release. And that could be many sprints, or it could be many times within a sprint. So that star probably shouldn't be there. And then continuous. Continuous is when you save your work, it's in production already. So everything you do is in production. There's risks and rewards to that pattern as well. And again, that star probably shouldn't be there. Now, there are also something called an initiative. So some people might call it a project. You might, if you're doing safe, call it an epic. It's a big, container of work. Let's call that an initiative or an epic. So here, ABC rather, there are 3 patterns. You might, for every initiative, might have many releases. So this initiative will have 5 releases before we close the initiative. In B, it's 1-to-1. When the initiative ends, we do 1 release and it's over with. In general, that's not as good, right? We want to have many releases per initiative, or we're having monolithic, value. There's times where that's, feasible, like, for example, going to Mars, right? And then finally, here we have many initiatives to 1 release. This is when there's like 10 initiatives going on, but the release is for all 10 of them. And you got to, per initiative, say, okay, in this release, we'll have this, and this release will have that. And so I've seen that pattern quite a bit as well. So understanding which of these 2 you're in is important. So what about your teams? Are they A, B, C, D, E up here? Or are they A, B, C down here, right? Okay. In addition to that, more about release planning. I'm going to get through the overview now and then maybe do a second 5 minutes. So create a roadmap for the project, epic, or initiative. Where is the roadmap that shows we're going? We have a separate video for the roadmap. You need to be able to estimate release capacity and predict what is or is not going to be in a release. I'm going to have a separate video about minimum possible product, or MPP, but this is starting to get into what is the minimum possible product given the constraints on our solution. And then each sprint you're going to update that plan, right? Every sprint informs you more about, the reality. And you're going to mitigate risks to scope because of that. And if you've already released, then you should have metrics on that release that you're monitoring: quality metrics, stability metrics, productivity metrics, and engagement metrics, all different kinds of great metrics. We have separate videos about metrics. Okay, so wow, I'm down to 1 minute here. So the only thing that we can get deeper into is this one. So let's do it. In the kit, we have techniques for how to find your sprint capacity. Now, if you already have a history, you're good. But if you don't have a history, it's just a matter of coming up with a proxy. And there's lots of great ways to come up with a velocity proxy. So if you don't have a history, use a proxy. Once you know your sprint capacity, you can calculate your release capacity. That's easy. A release has a business case, which dictates how many months or years that initiative can go. Divide that by your sprint length, and there is a number of sprints you'll get. Multiply that by your capacity and you're good, and by your velocity, and now you know your release capacity. You also need to learn how to estimate an entire release in story points. And then finally, you want to compare those. Compare the release size to your capacity based on the business case. Now, there are cases where there is no business case, in which case, then it's just a matter of you keep building until people say enough, right? So that I have actually had clients like that, but most of them have a budget for their initiatives. All right, so that's it. I'm going to do a second 5 minutes. And in that second 5 minutes, what I'm going to cover is a little bit of the skills here. Now, we have other videos for a lot of it, so I don't want to do overkill there, but I'm going to just go a little deeper into this area here. So if you're interested in this area, stick around. All right, starting a second 5 minute timer. So finding your sprint capacity. If I go to this document here, nope, wrong one. All right. So in here, right, we talk about, and you can take screenshots or pause or whatever, how do you find your sprint capacity? What I don't cover in this article is how do you come up with a proxy? And there's some really cool ways to do that. Actually, no, there is one of the proxy techniques is here, which is use your gut and then add up the points. You point first, load based on your best guess, then add up the points that randomly ended up being. And do that for 2 or 3 sprints. Just load on gut, and across those 2 or 3 sprints, look at the velocity that ended up being, because you estimate first, right? And then take an average or take the lowest of those and then adjust the plan so that it always is the lowest. And there's your proxy. So you can do a proxy that way. In SAFE, they do 8 points, right? What is it? 8 points per person per 2-week sprint, right? So 4 points per week. It's ridiculous to equate points in time. But guess what? If you don't have a proxy, do it. And then prove that proxy wrong just after 1 sprint. And you'll find it actually is sometimes not so inaccurate as you might think. So what you need is a technique for a proxy. You need to find your release capacity. Okay. So if you know how big your release is up front, then you just do the math. This release is going to be 15 sprints and our velocity is 100. Well, 15 times 100 is 1,500 points available. That's our capacity. If you don't know when your releases are, then you can't find a release capacity. Okay. So instead, find the capacity for your full business case. There's got to have been a business case that funded this thing. What's the expected time frame on that business case? Use that, and then that'll be your capacity. So whether you use a business case or a known release date coming up, both of those work. You're just doing points times sprints. Now, here's how you estimate the release size. What you do is, and there's a separate video on this, so I'm going to not go too deep, but it's about a ratio. You just find the features first and you relatively estimate those. So your smallest feature is a 1 and you scale the rest against that 1. Then you break down one of those features, the one you're probably going to build first, because then you don't have scrap, right? So take the feature you do first, break it down into stories and estimate that. Let's say that you ended up with a 3 feature point feature and you ended up with 30 story points of stories. Well, there's a 1 to 10 ratio there. So now, since every other feature has a feature point size, just multiply that by 10, and there's your overall estimate for the entire release, right? So very, very cool. So if you have 10 features and they each have a feature point, add that up, multiply by 10, there's your story point estimate for the range, and you've got your capacity up here, and you can immediately compare if your capacity is greater than or less than your needs for the release. So very quick, easy way to do that. So there's the last one, D, compare your release size to your capacity and adjust. Okay, so look at those 2 numbers. One was based on the business case and the amount of time we have. The other one is based on decomposing one feature and then using a ratio to calculate all the rest of them. Okay, so that's exciting. And is that everything I wanted to show you? I also have this. There's another way to show releases. So here on the left side, each of these columns is a week. So this is a 3-week sprint. And you can see they have their start and end dates for their sprint, and you can see the logical release will be here. So notice that you can have releases to production, or you can have releases that are dark and in production. So those are some things you'll want to think about as well, dark releases or not. Here they have logical releases. What this means is they have it dark. They have them that it's all ready to go, but someone's got to flip the switch. So where you see logical here today, they might call that dark release, right? Anyway, you get the idea. I'll fix that. Not on your time. I can't help myself. Dark release 1 and dark release 2. Okay. Over here on the right, this is how SAFE does a roadmap, and you can see they actually like to put their releases here. So you can see this here's a release 1.0, this here's a release 2.0. Notice that the releases don't have to coincide with the end of a quarter here. So they call this release on demand, develop on cadence. So it's cadence, but the releases are anywhere inside of there. Same thing with sprints, by the way. If you have a 2-week sprint, it doesn't mean you have to release at the end. You can release in the middle. You can release multiple times. So decouple your releases from your cadences. That's a very important lesson, and we'll talk more about that in the safe video on releasing on demand. Okay, well, that's everything I think I wanted to show you. Hopefully you found that enlightening. Find out what your release strategy is and which one. Notice that A, B, C, D, E. The lower you go, the more you're putting into production more quickly. So, kind of something maybe to shoot for. All right. Well, my name is Anthony Crane. Thank you so much. I hope you found this video useful.